Richard Dalton sat at the sleek mahogany desk in his corner office, the New York skyline stretching out behind him like a concrete jungle of ambition and opportunity. The air was thick with the hum of productivity, punctuated by the steady clicking of keyboards and the muted conversations of his team. As the director of a prominent finance firm, Richard was known for his meticulous attention to detail and his unwavering adherence to the company's strict policies. He believed in excellence, but his definition of excellence often left little room for those who did not meet his exacting standards. His sharp blue eyes scanned the performance reports laid out before him, numbers and statistics swirling in his mind. Each chart represented the hard work of his employees, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The atmosphere in the office seemed to lack the integrity he prized so highly. Perhaps it was the recent whispers of discontent among staff, or perhaps it was his own growing concern about the company culture. Richard's thoughts drifted as he considered a bold move, one that he believed would reaffirm his commitment to honesty and transparency within the organization. Maria Torres, he murmured to himself, recalling the name of the cleaning staff member who had been with the company for several years. Maria was a quiet presence in the office, often overlooked by the hustle and bustle of the corporate world. As a single mother, she worked tirelessly to provide for her children, yet Richard wondered if her struggles might make her more susceptible to temptation. Could she be the test he needed to gauge the integrity of his team? The thought simmered in his mind, and as he laid down the reports, a plan began to take shape. Richard decided to conduct a surprise honesty check. He would leave his wallet on the conference table after hours, confident that the surveillance cameras would capture whatever transpired next. If Maria or any member of the cleaning staff took the wallet, it would serve as a valuable lesson about integrity, both for them and for the rest of the team. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the office, Richard felt a sense of righteousness wash over him. He gathered his belongings, his mind still racing with the implications of his decision, and made his way to the conference room. The large table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the muted colors of the office. He placed his wallet, a black leather case filled with credit cards and cash, carefully in the center of the table. Richard stepped back, surveying the room with a sense of satisfaction. "This will do," he said aloud, though the room was empty. He turned on his heel and exited, confident that the test would reinforce the culture of integrity he sought to cultivate within his firm. Meanwhile, Maria Torres swept through the office, her hands deftly maneuvering the cleaning supplies as she tidied up the space. The evening was quiet, the hustle of the day having dissipated. She hummed softly to herself, a melody of hope that reminded her of the dreams she held for her children's future. Maria was acutely aware of the burden of her responsibilities. The upcoming school fees weighed heavily on her mind, and every dollar counted. As she approached the conference room, she noticed the door ajar. Curiosity piqued, she stepped inside, her weary eyes landing on the wallet resting innocently on the table. For a moment, her heart raced. The sight of it brought forth a flurry of thoughts: her children's needs, the groceries she struggled to afford, the bills that seemed to multiply with each passing month. "What should I do?" Maria whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Torn between her moral compass and the relentless grip of desperation, she took a step closer to the table, her fingers brushing against the cool leather. She hesitated, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She remembered the lessons her mother had instilled in her. Honesty was paramount, and integrity was the foundation of a good life. Yet here was this temptation, so close, almost inviting. Was it wrong to consider the possibility that no one would know? "It's just a wallet," she thought, glancing around as if to reassure herself that no one was watching. But Maria caught herself. "No, I can't do this," she muttered, shaking her head as if to dispel the thoughts. The wallet belonged to someone who worked hard for what they had, just as she did. She was no thief. She was a mother, a provider. Steeling herself, she moved away from the table, her heart pounding as she turned to leave the room. Richard, meanwhile, was already imagining the satisfaction he would feel the next day when he reviewed the footage. He pictured himself addressing the team, sharing the results of his little experiment and using it as a teaching moment. Perhaps he would even commend Maria for her honesty, praising her for setting an example for the others. As he descended the elevator, lost in his thoughts of corporate strategy and morality, he didn't consider the impact his test might have on the very people he aimed to evaluate. He didn't know Maria's story, the sacrifices she made daily, or the struggles she faced as a single mother trying to make ends meet. The following morning, Richard arrived at the office with a sense of anticipation. He booted up his computer and navigated to the surveillance footage, eager to see the outcome of his little experiment. As the grainy video flickered to life on the screen, he leaned forward, his heart racing with the thrill of the reveal. "Let's see what you've got, Maria," he murmured, watching intently as the clock on the footage moved forward, inching closer to the moment when Maria entered the conference room. In a different part of the city, Maria's thoughts were consumed by her financial worries as she prepared for another long day of work. She had no idea that her integrity was being tested, that a simple act of cleaning would soon unravel into a moral dilemma that would challenge her beliefs and her future. As Richard watched Maria approach the table, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. There she was, his unwitting participant in a social experiment. But as the video continued, his expectations began to shift. Maria picked up the wallet, her expression a mixture of surprise and contemplation. She hesitated, and Richard felt a thrill of anticipation. Would she take it? But in an unexpected turn, Maria placed the wallet back on the table and walked away. Shocked, Richard sat back in his chair, disbelief washing over him. "She didn't take it," he breathed, grappling with the implications of her decision. He couldn't reconcile the image of the struggling single mother with the act of integrity she had just displayed. The revelation left him questioning his own judgments and assumptions about the people around him. As the office buzzed with the morning's energy, Richard found himself grappling with the nuances of human behavior and the complexities of morality, unaware that the seeds of doubt he had sown would soon lead to a tangled web of betrayals, assumptions, and unexpected revelations about trust. Richard Dalton sat in his dimly lit office, the glow of the computer screen illuminating his features with a cold, clinical light. He had spent the night tossing and turning, consumed with anticipation about the surveillance footage he was about to review. The clock ticked loudly in the otherwise silent room, each passing second heightening his anticipation. He felt a mix of apprehension and eagerness. After all, this was not just any ordinary review. Today, he would uncover the truth about Maria Torres, the humble cleaning lady who had unwittingly become the focal point of his moral experiment. As he clicked on the video feed, Richard's heart raced. He had left his wallet on the conference table, fully expecting to catch Maria in a moment of weakness. This was meant to be a testament to the integrity he valued so highly in his firm. But as he pressed play, the first few frames showed Maria entering the room, her modest cleaning cart trailing behind her. She looked tired, her eyes heavy with the weight of her responsibilities. Richard had seen her often, but today she would either be a hero or a disappointment in his eyes. The footage showed Maria glancing around the room, her eyes scanning the table and then landing on the wallet. For a moment she froze, her brow furrowing in thought. Richard leaned forward in his chair, a tense silence enveloping him as he prepared for the inevitable. However, what came next stunned him. Instead of pocketing the wallet, Maria reached out, picked it up, and examined it. Richard could see her lips move. Perhaps she was quietly assessing whether it was safe to take it or not. But then, she seemed to make a decision. With a deliberative slowness, she placed the wallet back on the table and continued her cleaning. Richard's mouth dropped open in disbelief. He replayed the moment several times, his mind racing to process what he had just witnessed. She hadn't taken it. The woman he had expected to catch in a lapse of judgment had instead shown remarkable integrity. Richard felt an unexpected wave of admiration for Maria. She was not just a mere cleaning staff member, she had proven herself to be a person of principle. As the footage concluded, Richard leaned back in his chair, his thoughts swirling. He had prepared himself to feel vindicated, to confirm his assumptions, but instead he felt a burgeoning respect for her. Yet a nagging doubt crept into his mind. Had the test been too easy? He had left the wallet in plain sight, and Maria had been alone in the conference room. Maybe it was an anomaly, an isolated incident of virtue. He couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to know more about Maria, to understand the depth of her integrity. Maybe I should reward her somehow, he muttered to himself, tapping a pen against his desk. But how? Just then, his phone buzzed, breaking his train of thought. It was a message from the HR department, and as he read, his stomach tightened. There had been reports of missing funds from the company's accounts, a significant amount that had gone unaccounted for. Richard felt a chill run down his spine. Could it be that the woman he had just admired was somehow involved in this? The timing felt too coincidental. With a furrowed brow, Richard stood up, pacing the confines of his office. The admiration he had felt for Maria now battled against a rising suspicion. He had just witnessed her act of honesty, yet the missing funds loomed large in his mind, creating a storm of uncertainty. He had to confront her, but he needed to tread carefully. Approaching her with accusations could backfire, especially if she was indeed innocent. He glanced at the clock again. It was nearly lunchtime. Richard decided to gather more information before making any conclusions. He needed to observe Maria more closely, to understand her actions and intentions in the context of the larger issue at hand. With that resolve, he headed towards the break room, hoping to find her there. As he walked through the bustling office, employees greeted him with nods and smiles, but his mind was elsewhere. He spotted Maria in the break room, filling a cup with coffee. She looked weary, yet determined, her hands steady as she poured. Richard hesitated at the door, his instincts urging him to approach her, yet the cloud of suspicion still hovered over him. "Good morning, Maria," he said, stepping inside the room. She turned, a surprised expression crossing her face. "Good morning, Mr. Dalton," she replied, her voice warm but tinged with an underlying tension. Richard forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil within. "I wanted to thank you for your hard work. I noticed you were especially thorough in the conference room yesterday." Maria's eyes softened at his compliment, but he could see the flicker of caution in her gaze. "Thank you, sir. It's my job after all. I take pride in it." Of course," Richard said, nodding. "I appreciate that, but I also want to ensure that everyone feels valued here." He paused, searching for the right words. "Tell me, how are things going for you? Are you finding everything manageable?" Maria's expression shifted, and Richard could see the weight of her circumstances reflected in her eyes. "It's challenging," she admitted. "But I'm managing. I have to for my children." Richard felt a pang of guilt. He was probing her for information under the guise of concern, but she was being honest about her struggles. "If there's anything we can do to support you, please let me know," he offered, trying to sound sincere. "Thank you, Mr. Dalton. That means a lot," she replied, though her voice carried a hint of skepticism. As they exchanged pleasantries, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more to Maria than met the eye. She was a single mother, working tirelessly to provide for her family, yet he couldn't ignore the whispers of doubt that had begun to cloud his judgment. He had witnessed her integrity just moments ago, yet the missing funds loomed like a dark shadow over their interaction. After their brief conversation, Richard returned to his office, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts. He needed to investigate further, to uncover the truth about the missing money and how it intertwined with Maria's life. It was a precarious balance of trust and suspicion that he found himself navigating, and it left him feeling uneasy. Just as he settled back into his chair, another call came through from HR, this time bringing a fresh wave of anxiety. The voice on the other end was stern, and as they discussed the missing funds, Richard's heart sank further. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was caught in a web of deceit, and Maria, despite her recent display of honesty, could be at the center of it all. "Mr. Dalton," the HR representative said, "we need to take this matter seriously. We have a list of employees who had access to the funds, and it's crucial we act swiftly." Richard nodded, feeling the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. "Yes, I understand. I'll look into it immediately." As he hung up the phone, a sense of foreboding enveloped him. He had inadvertently set off a chain of events that now threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew about Maria and his own judgment. With a heavy heart, he prepared to dig deeper, torn between the integrity he admired and the emerging shadows of doubt that were beginning to cloud his vision. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered, and Richard was determined to find it, no matter where it led him. Richard Dalton sat in his office, the soft hum of the city outside barely breaking the silence within. He leaned back in his chair, fingers intertwined behind his head, contemplating the events of the past few days. The surveillance footage from the conference room had left him both impressed and puzzled. Maria Torres, the quiet cleaning lady, had returned his wallet without a second thought. Yet, the call from the HR department about the missing funds had thrust a cloud of doubt into his mind. He picked up his phone and scrolled through the files on his desk, searching for anything that could shed light on the situation. Maria's name appeared on his screen, and he felt a pull of guilt mixed with suspicion. He had respected her integrity, yet the missing funds loomed over him like a dark cloud. Could she, despite her apparent honesty, have been involved in something more devious? He shook his head, trying to dispel the troubling thought. "No," he muttered to himself, "I have to investigate further." Richard decided to look into the financial records, hoping to find any discrepancies that could lead him to the truth. He meticulously examined the spreadsheets, his brow furrowing as he noticed several irregularities. The numbers didn't add up, and the more he studied them, the more he felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Each click of his mouse echoed in the otherwise quiet office, amplifying his growing sense of dread. Meanwhile, Maria was at the other end of the office, lost in her own world. With a mop in one hand and a bucket in the other, she scrubbed the floor of the main hallway. Her thoughts drifted to her children, their faces lighting up every time she brought home a small treat or a toy. The school fees loomed over her like a mountain, and she felt the pressure mounting with each passing day. "I just need to make it through this month," she whispered to herself, a mantra she repeated often. As she finished mopping, her friend Rosa, who worked in the building's cafeteria, approached her. "Hey, Maria, you look exhausted. Have you thought about taking a break?" Rosa's voice was filled with concern, her eyes scanning Maria's weary face. "I can't afford to take a break," Maria replied, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "I need to make sure the kids have everything they need for school. Every penny counts." Rosa frowned, assessing her friend's situation. "You know, there are opportunities out there. Maybe you should think about looking for something better, something that pays more." Maria hesitated, her heart racing at the thought. "I don't know, Rosa. What if I can't find anything? This job is stable at least. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind, but she quickly dismissed it. And besides, I like my routine. But what if there's a chance to improve your situation? Rosa pressed, her voice softening. It's worth considering, don't you think? Maria sighed, feeling the weight of her friend's words. I need to focus on what I have right now. She forced a smile, but the knot in her stomach tightened. The seed of doubt Rosa had planted lingered, nagging at her as she returned to her cleaning. Later that day, Richard found himself standing in front of Maria as she finished tidying up a small break room. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows on the walls, and he took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation. "Maria," he began, his voice steady but not without a hint of tension. "Can we talk for a moment?" Maria looked up, startled. "Of course, Mr. Dalton. Is something wrong?" "Not exactly. I wanted to discuss something important." He gestured for her to sit at one of the small tables, and she complied, her heart racing. "I've noticed your hard work and dedication to this job, and I truly appreciate it." She nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you, sir. I just do my best every day." Richard leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "But I need to address a concern. There have been reports of missing funds in the office, and I want to know if you've noticed anything unusual." Maria's heart sank. "Missing funds? No, I haven't seen anything. I only come in to clean and leave." "Are you sure? I'm not accusing you, but I need to clarify," Richard pressed, his voice firm yet searching. "Mr. Dalton, I swear I haven't taken anything. I work hard for my paycheck, and I would never jeopardize my job or my reputation. I have 2 kids to support," she replied, her voice trembling slightly, but her eyes remained steady, reflecting her determination. Richard studied her, searching for any sign of deceit. "I understand, Maria. I need to ensure that everyone here is trustworthy, especially after what I witnessed with the wallet." "I returned your wallet because it was the right thing to do," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "I don't need to steal to provide for my children. I'm doing my best, and I appreciate this job." Richard felt a pang of guilt wash over him. He had seen her integrity, yet the shadows of doubt clouded his judgment. "I'm sorry if I made you feel cornered. It's just that with everything going on, I'm under a lot of pressure," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I understand pressure, sir, but I promise you I'm not involved in anything illicit. I'm just a cleaner trying to make ends meet," Maria said earnestly, her eyes pleading. Richard could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. "I need to do my due diligence, Maria. I'll be looking into everyone, not just you. I hope you understand." As she nodded, Richard felt a mix of resolve and doubt within him. He wanted to trust her, yet the missing funds loomed like a dark cloud over his judgment. After their conversation, he returned to his office, his heart heavy with uncertainty. The investigation had only just begun, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the brink of uncovering something much deeper than he had anticipated. Later that evening, as Maria gathered her belongings, her mind was still swirling with thoughts from her conversation with Richard. She felt a sense of betrayal, as though the trust she had built was suddenly fragile. But she also felt a spark of determination ignited by Rosa's words. Maybe it was time to consider a change, to take a risk that could lead to a better life for her children. As she stepped out of the building into the bustling streets of New York, the city seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The lights flickered, and the sounds of honking cars and chatter filled the air. Maria took a deep breath, inhaling the scents of street food and the distant melody of a street performer. She had always found solace in the city's rhythm, but tonight it felt different, charged with possibilities and uncertainties. "Maybe tomorrow," she whispered to herself, allowing hope to seep into her heart as she walked towards her home, her mind racing with thoughts of what could be. Richard Dalton sat at his desk, the cold light of the computer screen illuminating his furrowed brow. The air in his office felt dense with the weight of his thoughts. He had spent the past few hours digging through Maria Torres's past, a task that both intrigued and troubled him. He had unearthed a criminal record for petty theft, a stark contrast to the woman who had so recently returned his wallet, her honesty shining through the dimness of his expectations. The findings stirred a tempest of emotions within him. How could a person with such a checkered past exhibit such integrity now? Richard leaned back in his chair, glancing at the framed photographs of his family on the wall. Their smiles seemed to mock him, reminding him of the values he held dear. He was a man who prided himself on his ability to discern character, and yet he felt lost in a fog of confusion regarding Maria. Meanwhile, Maria was at her modest apartment, the sounds of her children playing in the background. She had just returned home from work, her heart heavy with the knowledge that Richard might be watching her every move. The confrontation she had imagined played over and over in her head. Would he understand? Would he see the desperation that had led her down a dark path in her youth? Sitting at the small kitchen table, she glanced at her kids who were oblivious to the adult troubles swirling around them. Maria sighed as she thought about the bills piling up, the school fees looming closer. She had fought hard to escape the shadows of her past, and the thought of that darkness creeping back into her life filled her with dread. "Mom, can we have pizza for dinner?" her son, Carlos, asked, his eyes sparkling with youthful enthusiasm. "Of course, sweetheart," Maria replied, forcing a smile. "Just give me a few minutes." As she prepared to order, her phone buzzed with a text. It was Rosa, her closest friend and confidant. "Hey, have you heard anything from Richard?" Maria's heart raced. She quickly typed back, "No, but I have a feeling he's been looking into my past." Rosa's reply came almost instantly. "You deserve to tell your story. Don't let him judge you for who you were. You're not that person anymore." As Maria stared at the phone, her mind buzzed with uncertainty. Could she confront Richard? Could she bear the thought of him knowing everything about her struggles? A knock on the door pulled her back to the present. She opened it to find her neighbor, Ms. Jenkins, a kind older woman who had always looked out for her. "Good evening, Maria. I brought some cookies," Ms. Jenkins said, holding out a plate. "I thought you and the kids might enjoy a treat." "Thank you so much, Ms. Jenkins. You're too kind," Maria replied, accepting the plate with a grateful smile. As the two chatted, Maria's thoughts drifted back to Richard. He was a man of principle, a man who stood for integrity. But could he see beyond her past? Would he understand that her mistakes were born from desperation? Back in his office, Richard was pacing, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts. He had always believed in second chances. Yet how could he reconcile Maria's past with his current suspicions? He had seen the footage of her returning his wallet, but now, with the discovery of her criminal history, the narrative felt incomplete. Richard decided to take a break and walked to the window, gazing out at the sprawling city below. The lights twinkled like stars, and for a moment he felt small in the vastness of it all. He thought of his own mistakes, of times when he had faltered, and how those moments had shaped him into the person he was today. Perhaps Maria was trying to do the same. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from HR. They were requesting a follow-up meeting regarding the missing funds. The urgency in their tone made his heart race. Was it possible that the theft was connected to Maria? That evening, as Maria tucked her children into bed, she felt a wave of determination. She would not allow Richard's scrutiny to dictate her worth. She had fought too hard to turn her life around. With a deep breath, she decided that she would confront him the next day, ready to share her story and reclaim her dignity. The following day dawned, and Maria arrived at the office with a sense of purpose. She took a moment to gather her thoughts in the restroom, looking at her reflection. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "You are not your past." As she entered the conference room to start her cleaning duties, she spotted Richard standing by the table, reviewing papers intently. He looked up, and their eyes met. For a brief moment, the world around them fell silent. "Maria," Richard said, his voice steady yet laced with tension. "Can we talk?" "Yes, I need to talk to you too," she replied, her heart pounding in her chest. Richard gestured for her to sit, and she took a seat across from him, feeling the weight of the moment. The air was thick with unspoken words, and both felt the gravity of the conversation about to unfold. "First, I want to say that I respect you for what you did with the wallet," Richard began, his tone softer than before. "I've been looking into your background, and I found something that concerns me." Maria's heart sank. She knew this moment was coming, and the fear of being judged flooded her mind. "I know about my past. I made mistakes. But I have changed, Richard. I'm not that person anymore." He studied her, the conflict evident in his eyes. "I understand that people can change, but seeing your record made me question everything. I need to know if I can trust you." "Trust is earned, and I've been trying to earn it every day," Maria replied, her voice steady despite the tremor of anxiety within her. "I did what I had to do to survive once, but I have worked hard to provide a better life for my children." Richard leaned back, his expression softening. "I see the dedication you put into your work. It's just, I don't want to make the wrong judgment." "I want you to see me for who I am now, not who I was," she implored, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I am trying to build a future for my children, and I can't afford to let my past define me." Richard felt the tightness in his chest loosen slightly. He was torn. Part of him wanted to believe her, yet another part still clung to the caution of his earlier suspicions. "What if I give you a chance, but I need to keep an eye on you?" Maria nodded, relief flooding through her. "I understand. I just need that chance to show you I'm trustworthy." Richard extended his hand, a fragile truce forming between them. "Then let's start fresh. I'll monitor things closely, but I want to see you succeed." As they shook hands, an unspoken agreement was forged in that moment, a chance for redemption. Little did they know, the shadows of doubt and suspicion would continue to loom over them, threatening to unravel the fragile bond they had begun to build. Richard returned to his office, the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders, while Maria left the conference room with a flicker of hope igniting in her heart, unaware of the storm that was brewing just beyond their fragile truce. Richard Dalton sat in his office, the sunlight filtering through the large glass windows that offered a panoramic view of New York City. Despite the bustling world outside, his focus remained on the small monitor displaying the surveillance footage of the previous day. He had been scrutinizing Maria Torres, the cleaning woman whose integrity he had put to the test with his wallet. The more he watched, the more he found himself captivated by her work ethic. As the clock ticked forward, Richard couldn't shake off the feeling of admiration that was slowly replacing his initial doubts. Maria moved with purpose, meticulously cleaning every corner of the office, her brow furrowed in concentration. He watched as she interacted with the few employees still lingering in the office, exchanging polite smiles and brief conversations. "Good evening, Maria. You're a lifesaver, keeping this place tidy," one of the junior analysts said as he grabbed his bag to leave. "Thank you, David. Have a great night," Maria replied, her voice warm and genuine. Richard leaned back in his chair, his internal conflict swirling within him. He had initially viewed this entire situation as a mere test of honesty, but now he was beginning to see Maria not just as a subject of his scrutiny, but as a person, an individual trying to navigate through life's challenges. Yet the shadow of the missing funds lingered in his mind, casting doubt over his newfound admiration. Meanwhile, across town, Maria was grappling with her own feelings of unease. The weight of Richard's gaze felt like a heavy blanket, suffocating her spirit. She had overheard whispers among the staff, speculating about the missing funds and her past. Each time she caught snippets of conversations, her heart raced and a knot formed in her stomach. Was she being watched? Did they think she was capable of stealing? "Rosa, I'm not sure how much longer I can do this," she confessed to her friend during their lunch break at a nearby cafe. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but Maria felt far from comforted. "What if they think I'm guilty? I can't afford to lose this job." Rosa, always the supportive friend, leaned in closer. "Maria, you know you've worked hard to turn your life around. You're not that person anymore. Don't let their doubts get to you. Just keep doing your job the best you can." "I know, but every time I see Richard, I feel like he's judging me. It's like he's waiting for me to mess up again," Maria replied, her voice trembling. "What if I make a mistake? What if I'm not good enough?" Rosa reached across the table, taking Maria's hand in hers. "Listen, you're stronger than you think. Remember why you're doing this. Your kids need you. You're their hero, and they look up to you. Don't let fear dictate your choices." Maria nodded, feeling a flicker of determination ignite within her. She had always been a fighter, and she couldn't let Richard's scrutiny break her resolve. But as the days passed, that flicker was tested. Late-night bills piled up, and her children's needs weighed heavily on her mind. The thought of making a desperate choice began to creep in, whispering promises of relief and security. Back in the office, Richard's admiration for Maria was growing, yet so was his concern. He found himself watching her more closely, observing the way she handled her cleaning duties with care and respect. The way she interacted with others revealed a kindness that contradicted the perception he had of her as merely a cleaning staff. He noted how she took extra time to straighten the chairs in the conference room, ensuring everything was just right before leaving. "Maria, could you come in for a moment?" Richard called out one afternoon, his heart racing as he prepared to confront her about the feelings that had been stirring within him. "Yes, Mr. Dalton," she replied, stepping into his office, her expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I just wanted to say," he started, searching for the right words, "that I've noticed how hard you work. You take pride in what you do, and it doesn't go unnoticed." Maria blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected praise. "Thank you, sir. I just try to do my job well. It's important to me." Richard nodded, but the doubt still lingered in his mind. "And I appreciate that. Just keep up the good work." As she left his office, a small smile danced on her lips, but the unease still gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that Richard was still watching her closely, analyzing her every move. Later that evening, as Maria returned home, she found her children sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by schoolbooks and crayons. Their laughter filled the air, momentarily lifting her spirits. She knelt beside them, joining in their playful chaos, but her mind wandered back to her conversations with Rosa. "Mom, can we have pizza for dinner?" Her youngest son, Matteo, piped up, his eyes shining with hope. "Sure, sweetheart. Let me just check the fridge," she said, forcing a smile even though her heart sank at the thought of the delivery cost. As she rummaged through the fridge, the weight of her financial struggles crashed down upon her again. The pizza sounded like a luxury she couldn't afford. In that moment, a desperate thought crossed her mind. What if she just borrowed a little money? Just enough to get through the week. The temptation tugged at her, yet deep down, she knew it was a path she didn't want to take. Later that night, as she lay in bed, Maria's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. She thought of her children, their innocent faces, and the dreams she had for them. Suddenly, the image of Richard's stern face flashed before her. It struck her that she was at a crossroads. "Rosa, what if I'm not strong enough?" she whispered to herself. "What if I end up making choices I can't take back?" The next day, Maria met with Rosa again, pouring her heart out. "I feel like I'm teetering on the edge. I don't want to disappoint my kids, but the pressure is overwhelming. Sometimes I think about taking shortcuts, but I know it's wrong. I just want to be a good mother." Rosa listened intently, her expression serious. "Maria, you have to stay true to yourself. The world can be cruel, but your integrity is what sets you apart. Think of your children. They need you to be strong, even when it's hard. Do you really want to go back to that life?" Maria thought about her past, the choices that had led her to this point. "No, I don't. I want more for them. But sometimes it feels like the walls are closing in." "Then fight back," Rosa urged, her voice firm. "You have the strength within you. Remember, you're not alone in this. You have me, and you have your kids." As Maria walked home that day, she felt lighter. Rosa's words echoed in her mind, igniting a spark of determination. She would not let the fear of judgment or desperation dictate her choices. She would stay true to herself and her values, no matter how tempting the alternative seemed. Richard, on the other hand, continued to grapple with his own internal conflict. As he observed Maria, he found himself torn between the admiration he felt for her work ethic and the lingering doubts about her past. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, yet he was determined to give her the benefit of the doubt. In the dim light of his office, he found himself contemplating the true meaning of integrity. Was it merely about never making mistakes? Or was it about overcoming adversity and choosing the right path, even when faced with temptation? And as he reflected on Maria's character, he began to wonder if the real test of integrity was not the absence of flaws, but the resilience to rise above them. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Richard and Maria simmered beneath the surface. Each passing day brought new challenges, both for Richard as he navigated the complexities of leadership and for Maria as she fought to maintain her integrity in the face of temptation. The stakes were rising, and the choices they made would ultimately shape their destinies in ways neither of them could yet foresee. Richard Dalton sat at his desk, the fluorescent lights casting a stark glow over the office, his mind racing with the implications of the anonymous tip he had just received. The voice on the other end of the line had been shaky, barely above a whisper, but the message was clear. The missing funds weren't linked to Maria Torres. Instead, they were being embezzled by someone within his inner circle. Richard felt a surge of guilt wash over him as he recalled the doubts he had harbored about Maria's integrity. He had seen her hesitation with the wallet, had watched her choose honesty over desperation. Yet here he was, a man quick to judge, questioning the character of someone who had done the right thing. Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He needed to find Maria and apologize. He had spent days doubting her, scrutinizing her every move, and now he was determined to make amends. He grabbed his coat and rushed toward the elevator, his heart pounding with urgency. As he descended, he replayed their last conversation in his mind, the way she had stood there, eyes wide, pleading her case. "I would never take from you," she had said, and he had dismissed her words too easily. When he reached the lobby, he glanced around, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. The office was still bustling, employees chatting and packing their bags for the day, but Maria was nowhere in sight. Richard felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He approached the reception desk, where Linda, the receptionist, was tidying up her area. "Linda, have you seen Maria?" he asked, trying to keep his tone calm despite the frantic thoughts racing through his mind. Linda looked up, her brow furrowed in thought. "I think she left about 10 minutes ago. She mentioned something about needing to pick up her kids." Richard nodded, disappointment washing over him. He had missed her. He turned to leave but stopped suddenly, a thought striking him. "Wait, do you know where she usually goes after work?" Linda thought for a moment. "There's a diner a few blocks away. It's a small place, but she goes there sometimes. I think she likes the coffee." Richard thanked her and set off toward the diner, determination fueling his steps. As he walked, the crisp autumn air filled his lungs, but he hardly noticed the chill. All he could think about was the weight of his assumptions and the need to correct his mistake. He had misjudged someone who had shown nothing but integrity, and now he felt a compelling need to express his remorse. Upon arriving at the diner, Richard pushed open the door and stepped inside. The warm, inviting atmosphere contrasted sharply with his frigid thoughts. The smell of coffee and freshly baked pastries wafted through the air, and he scanned the room for Maria. He spotted her in a corner booth, her head bent over a piece of paper, her brow furrowed in concentration. Relief washed over him, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of urgency. He approached her with quick steps, but as he drew closer, he noticed something unsettling. Maria was engaged in conversation with a man who sat across from her. He was dressed in a leather jacket, his demeanor casual, but there was something about the way he leaned in towards her that made Richard's heart race. He hesitated, unsure whether to interrupt. The two were animated, their voices low but intense, and as Richard drew nearer, he caught snippets of their conversation. "You've got to make a choice, Maria. This is your chance," the man said, sliding a small envelope across the table. Richard's breath hitched in his throat. He couldn't make out the contents of the envelope, but the way Maria's eyes flickered between the man and the envelope sent a jolt of alarm through him. What was happening? Was this an exchange of money? Had he misjudged her all over again? He took a step back, feeling the world tilt beneath him. The guilt of his previous assumptions threatened to consume him, but the sight before him felt like a betrayal. Just moments ago, he had been ready to apologize, ready to acknowledge her integrity. Now everything was unraveling before his eyes. "Maria!" he called out, his voice more forceful than he intended. The moment hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and both Maria and the man turned to face him. A flicker of surprise crossed Maria's face, quickly replaced by something akin to panic. "Richard!" she exclaimed, her voice rising slightly. "What are you doing here?" Richard's gaze shifted between her and the man, feeling the tension crackle in the air. "I came to talk to you, but it looks like you're busy." His words were laced with confusion and hurt. Maria glanced at the man, and he gave her a slight nod before standing up. "I'll catch you later," he said, his tone nonchalant, but his eyes narrowed as he looked at Richard. With that, he walked past Richard, brushing against him as he left the diner. Richard turned to Maria, his heart racing. What was that about? The question burst out of him, raw and unfiltered. Maria looked down at her hands, her cheeks flushing. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard took a seat across from her, his frustration spilling over. "Then what is it? Because it sure looked like you were getting involved in something questionable." "I wasn't," she insisted, her eyes flashing with defiance. "I was just listening to him. He's a friend. He was trying to help me understand my options. I'm trying to find a better job, Richard. I can't keep working like this and struggling every day." Richard ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions. I came here to apologize, Maria. I thought you were involved in the missing funds. I was wrong about you, and I wanted to make that right. But now you think I'm doing something illegal? Maria's voice trembled, a mix of anger and hurt. You don't know what it's like for me. You don't know the choices I have to make every day to keep my kids safe and fed. Richard felt the weight of her words, a sharp reminder of the disparity between their lives. He had been quick to judge without understanding her reality, and now he was faced with the consequences of his actions. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice softer now, filled with sincerity. "I should have trusted you. I know I was wrong, but you have to understand, seeing you with him—" "It's not what you think," Maria interrupted, her voice rising again. "I'm trying to figure out a way to improve my life, Richard. I want more for my kids than this job. I thought I could trust you, but you were ready to throw me under the bus." Richard felt a pang of regret. "I know. I should have believed in you. I should have seen the truth instead of jumping to conclusions." Maria's expression softened slightly, but the tension remained. "What if I can't trust you now? What if this is all just another test?" "Please just let me explain," Richard urged, leaning forward. "I've been investigating the missing funds, and I just found out that they aren't related to you at all. It was someone else, someone I trusted. I want to make this right, but I need you to let me." Maria studied him, uncertainty etched across her face. "You expect me to just believe you after everything?" "I don't expect anything. I just want a chance to show you that I was wrong. I want to help you, to support you in finding a better opportunity. You deserve that." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Finally, Maria sighed, her defenses wavering. "I want to believe you, Richard. I really do. But it's hard. I've fought so long to prove myself, and now—" Richard reached across the table, his hand hovering just above hers. "I promise I'll do everything I can to support you. No more tests, just honesty. Let's work together to find a way out of this mess." For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, but it was quickly overshadowed by doubt. "What if I can't trust you?" "Then let me earn that trust back," he said, his voice steady. "Let me show you that I can be someone you rely on." Maria hesitated, and Richard could see the internal battle waging within her. He held his breath, waiting for her response, hoping for a chance to mend the rift between them. But as the diner buzzed with the chatter of patrons around them, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at a crossroads, each moment stretching into an uncertain future. The question of trust loomed large, and the stakes were higher than ever.